friendly races tend to have a hands-off policy towards interacting, whereas the ones who are more oriented towards service to self are ones who are actually very much involved for their own reasons with these various organizations and shadow governments and what have you. One of the specific stories that is told in the System Lords and the 12 Dimensions, and it's a really interesting chapter, I think, is the story of the Greys. Now, that is a race that is very much oriented, and I guess you need to back up and say also that the universe is, very much, especially in the third dimension, polarity organized, and there is a duality. That duality exists because it creates spin and a kind of scalar wave that then is what draws reality into manifestation. But the Greys, and for the most part, a lot of the races, ET races that you see present on Earth, while there are some that are related to being in the third dimension, many of them are not. And many of them are coming from various other dimensions into this particular one. But the story that I find the most interesting is the story of what is happening currently and will be happening between now and approximately 2569. And that is the story of an ET bioinvasion. Now, that is related to much of the information that you've seen with regard to hybrid humans. And I, again, need to back up and say that this particular sphere and this solar system was designated very, very long time ago as the universe that would be related, or the solar system that would be the home of human angelic soul matrices. And for the most part, I would say that a good, 75% of humans incarnated tend to be from the human angelic race of souls. But there are, and the human angelic race of souls are also of a polarity that makes them oriented towards service to others. What is happening with regard to this hybrid invasion is that in the solar system where the Greys originated, and they are actually in various solar systems, and they are at a higher dimension, and they are also at a part of the timeline that is further in the future. To make a very long story short, through their manipulations with time travel and with time and dimensional warp, they, in their own world, created I think it was about 1,000 years ago, our time, a rip in their space-time, in their dimension. Now, what that meant is that they created, within their solar system, a kind of black hole. It would be as if in our solar system, suddenly we were manipulating with time, which I guess really we are. But things went awry, and somewhere way off of Pluto, we ripped a hole in space-time, and this small black hole was created. Now, the black hole starts to draw everything in, and what's happening in the gray solar system is that this hole is actually increasing in size, and they looked for some place on the timeline that was close enough for them to actually come through. And the most ideal situation for them was to come through and make an attempt to populate Earth. Now, naturally, this is not necessarily known to the shadow governments who are working with them. It's not like they came in and said, well, we're going to colonize Earth. But what they did do was they came in and they said, well, we're going to give you a lot of this kind of technology, and we're going to give you enough rope so that you hang yourself, essentially. Scalar waves and this, that, and the other thing. And we're going to, in exchange, be allowed to create hybrid human physical bodies that our ET souls are able to actually incarnate in. So what you have happening in the world right now, as an aside to everything else that's happening, because it's very complex, is that there are beginning to be hybrid humans who are being created, who are human in every way, but who are accommodating the incarnation of this ET race of individuals. Now, there are also a lot of what I'm going to call souls who have come through in human bodies prior to this, who, and many of them are in positions of power, and many of them actually work in conjunction with these shadow organizations. And unbeknownst to them, even though they think they're human, they're drawn to actually work with these ETs because it's part of their life mission and the reason why they incarnated on Earth. And so they are facilitating the work of these ETs in an attempt to actually sort of bioengineer a human body that these ETs can actually incarnate in. What becomes really interesting is that much of the bioengineering, or the geoengineering that is happening on the planet today, you can say all you want that it has to do with kind of like stopping the heating up of the Earth, et cetera, but it actually is an attempt to change the atmosphere, unbeknownst to the people who are actually employing it and using it. It's an attempt to change the atmosphere and to change the Earth so that it is more hospitable to these ETs who are going to be incarnating more and more and more on the planet. And in fact, the population explosion that is happening on the planet can be somewhat related to what is actually happening there. Now, I do want to speed ahead and say, and this then brings us to timeline collapse and universal ascension, because that's part of the information that's in that book. These ETs, the Earth itself is a being and has a soul and has a life mission, and its life mission is to guard and to allow the human angelic soul matrices to actually inhabit it. As it sees this happening on the timeline, when we look forward through the remote viewing and techniques that we use, we've been able to see that on the timeline that's coming, the Earth will actually interfere in conjunction with the solar system to, in the year 2569, is what it appears right now, and that could change. But it appears that the current civilization that we know will last until that particular point, at which time, for the most part, almost all of civilization will be destroyed by a cataclysm that happens from off-planet, related to asteroids, related to collisions and these types of things. And that will then, there will be enough left of human angelics to continue on and to begin again without the hybrids. So at that particular point, the hybrid souls and the ET souls will essentially lose, and that is really what is planned on taking place. I should also say that the ETs are not necessarily wanting to make this their home, although they do want to infiltrate. But what they are really attempting to do is they have come back in time in order to kind of gain time in their race against the end of their world, so that they can then somehow figure out a way to change and alter the manipulation of the actual whole that they've created, and perhaps go then forward in time back to their world and seal up the hole that they created. And I would tend to say from our information that much of what they're doing with CERN, and again, unbeknownst to the people who are fooling around with this technology, is related to assisting them to figure out these manipulations with the time wave and how they can actually then seal up the hole that they created in their particular world. You know, I try and be very, very truthful with what I do, and I'm very, very careful about the information that I have, that I'm able to receive, and if it resonates for you, then you're more than welcome to it. But we're not trying to create any kind of dogma or religion, and that's really kind of how I feel about it. The truth of the matter is, if you look at the book and what we've looked at, there are some real challenges for the United States and for even Southern California that are coming ahead between now and 2030. And while I haven't looked at a specific thing because it's just never a question that's been asked, there are some things that really everybody will need to know at some future point. What I did want to say about California in general is, there is very unfortunately, there is a breakup of the United States that is ahead. There is definitely going to be regionalization, and it's all covered in Timeline Collapse, this new book. But we are already essentially in World War III, and we are headed for challenge. Unfortunately, it will lead to the bankrupting of the federal government, and it will lead to the regionalization and breakup of the United States. California is a place that you're going to want to actually be. The Pacific Coast will be one of the regions that will be very successful and will fend off a lot of things. I would suggest that maybe you want to consider sometime in the next 20 years moving out of San Diego,